Welcome to another edition of the CDG BizCast. I'm your host, Christian Gonzalez, co-owner of Creativity Design Group, a digital marketing firm in Houston, Texas. Today we are going to be discussing some website pet peeves that annoy users regularly and how neglecting to fix them can cost your company new customers. Joining me today are my two wonderful consumer panelists, Sarah and Justin. They will be discussing what ruins their experience when checking out new websites, and I will discuss how these design pitfalls should be corrected. Millions and millions of people in the world use the internet every day to look up the stuff that they need. That's why it's important to have a website that takes good user experience in mind. But there are a lot of websites on the web that outright disregard good UX, which we will refer to user experience as. We'll just refer to it as UX. User experience is very important if you want to make sure that your bounce rate stays low. Bounce rate referring to how many people leave your website the moment that they pull it up. There are a lot of things out there that annoy the users. You don't want to have a website that will drive away users because, well, there goes your sales. You won't get any leads. You don't want to scare away your user base because your website had something on it that caused them to click away. We're going to discuss various examples of what not to do and what you should be doing instead. So I thank you guys for joining me on the show. Once again, welcome back to CDG BizCast. And Sarah, I know that you have an example that you want to share with us right now. Please tell us more about what you do not like when you're browsing the web, when you come across a website. What have you discovered lately?
Okay, thank you for having me on the show, Christian. Always a pleasure. What peeves me off is when websites advertise bargain prices on their sites and you think, absolutely fantastic. Just what I wanted. Great price. Okay, we'll have that. So you go on there and you navigate through, and they don't make it easy with the navigating. Some of the buttons don't work. And then you have to click this other button, and then sometimes that doesn't work. But then you click this particular item, the one you find, and then you put it in your basket. And when you get to your basket and then you get to the checkout and everything else, the price has jumped up. So that is misrepresenting a price. The confusing navigation on a lot of sites gets on my nerves as well because you don't know where to click. It's like click here, and then when you click there, nothing happens. Click this other one, nothing happens, and it takes you somewhere else. The pop-ups get on my nerves. So it's just overall, it just annoys me. It's a big bugbear, the fact that the prices just change just like that. They have expired offers on there and they're outdated. Some of the pictures are not great. The quality of them's pretty grainy. And you got some of them that can't be accessed through your phone, which is quite annoying because sometimes if you're on your phone, you see a bargain, say on the telly, and you click in and you think, Oh, right. Okay. I can't use my phone. I've got to use my desktop or my laptop. So that is annoying. And some of them just tend to make it a bit too complicated to understand some of the sites to what you're doing. It's even to experienced people. And also, when you go on, sometimes you're looking for something, they tell you that they have in stock and it comes up invalid search. That is the most annoying thing because it's there. You're advertising it. So that's my biggest bugbears there, Christian. Quite a array of different things, pop-ups and things like that. And it just super annoys you as a consumer. Absolutely.
Yes, I see what you mean. A lot of those things annoy me too. And before we talk about the website aspect of it, I want to talk about the advertising aspect of it. What you just described, where when you add an item to your cart and it shows a different price, much higher than the original price that was shown on the product listing page, that's called bait and switching, and that's illegal. In fact, you can get in a lot of legal trouble bait and switching your customers like that. It's not legal online, and it's also not legal in store. For example, if you have a sales circular flyer in your hand, a paper one that you received in the mail, and then you go to the store and they tell you that they don't have that item or they're not going to honor that price, and they try to give you another item of the same price or the same item advertised at the original price, that's illegal. That's false advertising. And businesses who do that can get in a lot of trouble with the Federal Trade Commission. That alone is not just an issue with poor website design, but it's also a legal issue, and it's very deceptive. It could build distrust among your consumer base. So businesses should never ever utilize the bait and switch method. Whichever website you were on that was doing that, shame on them. They're just trying to lie to get a sale. It's a very shady tactic, and in my eyes, it's a form of scamming someone. And secondly, poor navigation. I can't stand websites where you cannot clearly find what you need. Websites should have a navigation bar at the top, and if you're on a desktop computer, you should not utilize the hamburger menu, which is the three stripes indicating the navigation menu as you see on mobile. That's fine on mobile, but on computers, don't use the hamburger menu. It just creates confusion for your users who are looking at your website on their computer screens. Sometimes it's overlooked and you can't see the navigation labels. If you want people to find the information that they are seeking when they are browsing your website, have the navigation clear and labeled, and don't make them jump through a bunch of hoops trying to find the page that they're looking for. That's a horrible method, and it's an easy way to increase your bounce rate. Have clearly defined labels in your navigation, and don't utilize what we call mystery meat navigation, which is basically nonverbal navigation, where you see icons instead of words representing each item. That confuses people, especially if they have not been on your website and have never been on it before ever in their life. That confuses people. They're not going to know what your symbols or your pictograms represent. Use words. Never go that route. And of course, make sure that all of your links, when you click on them, are functional. Sorry, you told me while you were explaining what you didn't like, that you don't like it when you click on links and they don't work, right?
Yeah, I'll say it's extremely frustrating because it does say click here for this particular thing. You click there and nothing happens. And then you think, well, what's the point in that when it doesn't even work?
Exactly.
Where am I supposed to click now?
Right.
It makes no sense.
Exactly. And how are business owners going to be able to generate leads when none of their buttons, especially their call to action buttons, aren't working? So before you even launch your website to the public, double check with your design agency or your website designer. Make sure that every button, every link works. And now let's talk about those annoying pop-ups. And boy, I could talk about pop-ups all day because they are very annoying. For one thing, Google penalizes your website based on user experience or UX. Pop-ups can ruin the user experience. Google is looking at your website to see if on mobile are pop-ups ruining the user experience. They are checking to see if your website is mobile responsive. Mobile responsiveness has been a ranking factor on Google since 2014, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. If they see that your pop-ups are ruining the mobile user experience, they're going to penalize your site and eventually blacklist it. They'll start pushing it further and further down the list of results, and then eventually they'll just drop it like a hot potato. On desktop, it's different because you have more screen space, so Google doesn't really take into account the desktop usability aspect when it comes to pop-ups, but they do on mobile because more people worldwide are browsing the web on a mobile device than they are on a desktop computer. So Google puts them of higher priority versus desktop users. So pop-ups are very, very annoying, especially when you are trying to click around a website and then one comes up out of nowhere, or maybe you're scrolling through and one comes up out of nowhere. Now, I do recommend the use of exit intent pop-ups to help capture someone's attention before they decide to leave. That's how it works. I think we've all seen that, where when you move your cursor closer to the top of your browser, either to close a tab or to hit the back button, a pop-up shows up saying, wait, don't go. Before you go, take this coupon. Exit intent pop-ups are great to capture leads as long as they are not too intrusive, because that's different than when you're just scrolling randomly through the page or browsing through the page and your cursor has never once went near the exit or the back button. When you get pop-ups showing up while you're scrolling, that's very annoying and it disrupts the user experience. But I do recommend the use of pop-ups only when you're trying to capture last-minute leads before they decide to leave your site. I don't like pop-ups who bother you while you're scrolling through the site. That is very, very annoying. And here's the thing about pop-up blockers. Pop-up blockers do not block internal pop-ups within your website. These are the pop-ups that we're talking about that show offers or ask to subscribe to newsletters. They only block advertising pop-ups. I agree. Too many pop-ups will destroy the user experience, and it's a great way to scare off possible customers who are coming to your site looking for a certain service. I agree with you on that. Pop-ups are basically the kiss of death. They will click off your site. They will never return. Now, Justin, I know that you also wanted to discuss a pretty long list of examples of website pet peeves that in particularly annoy you. What do you have on your list?
Well, pop-ups is something that really annoys me, especially when it's pay pop-ups. Let me explain that one. And it's very simple because my local water sewer utility is guilty of this one, actually, where unless you allow a pop-up, you do not actually have the ability to use their online portal to pay them. That is really annoying. And far too many companies are hiding more content than they should behind pop-up paywalls, in my opinion.
I agree. Those are very annoying, and it's especially annoying too on newspaper websites where maybe you're just trying to look back in time at older articles because you're doing research on a certain topic, and they still expect you to get a subscription to read an older article. To me, the older articles, especially if they were, I would say, more than 5 years old tops, those should become public domain. They shouldn't force users to get a subscription just to read an article from a long time ago, especially if it's a 10 or 20-year-old article. There's people out there who use these websites all the time to do research on certain topics, and forcing them to pay a subscription to read about old news, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I've been there myself, Justin, and I understand. It's very annoying that certain things are stuck behind a paywall, especially when it's not worth the prices that they're charging.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand my local utility wanting to put the bill pay behind a paywall because that's how you pay your service with them. But to force you to allow them to put a pop-up in your system to do it, I think is not really the greatest.
Now, the reason why some utility companies do this, and I've seen this before with one of the local electric companies here, they do this as well. It's more of a matter of poor design. When the developers were creating that system, they had it set to where, in order to make a payment, the form to fill out or the confirmation pop-up, one or the other, shows up in a pop-up window. And that's why they tell you not to use pop-up blockers. It's bad design because a lot of people do use pop-up and ad blockers to help keep their internet browsing experience clean. I personally think that it's very annoying. What really should be done in this case is when you are utilizing some sort of payment portal or some sort of online point of sale, make sure it all stays within one window, because having pop-ups throughout the process just creates confusion with the user. Sometimes when they're trying to check out, when they're trying to pay their bill, they're wondering why they didn't get a confirmation, or they're wondering why they're not able to see the form. That's why, because it's hidden in a pop-up, and their pop-up blocker that they utilize daily is not allowing them to pay their bill. On websites where you have important streamlined processes like this, It should all be kept within the main window. There should be no pop-ups involved. Otherwise, it's just going to create one angry customer. And once you create an angry customer, you're at risk of losing them, possibly for life.
And that's the thing that makes me angry about it, is that it's actually cheaper to pay online than pay by check with my local water utility. They're trying to transition all their customers to online-only payments. And I find that that's very unhealthy, because there are a lot of people who don't exactly have digital connectivity. How are they supposed to pay the bill if the bill's an online-only payment portal? Because I'll tell you, some of the prepaid banks don't actually offer automatic bill pay. I know my local water utility does not offer auto draft pay options.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. That can be problematic, especially for people who just don't have access to the internet. They might have their phones, and that's one option, but a lot of people also do not like to go through the hassle of paying bills through their phones. The businesses do not want to handle paper checks anymore because it takes them too long to clear the bank. They also have the hassle of having to take them to their local bank to get them deposited into their account. Here at CDG, we don't even accept checks, period, because we don't like the hassle of waiting. The hassle with dealing with checks is a whole separate topic on its own, but businesses no longer want to utilize checks anymore because they are a hassle. We don't like waiting for them to clear in the bank. We don't like having to take them to the bank to deposit them. And most importantly, we don't like to deal with the risk of possibly handling a fraudulent check. Now, that is a whole different topic for another episode. Going back to website UX, yes, that's terrible. There should be no pop-ups involved in the checkout process. And that's not just with paying bills online, but anytime you're trying to buy something or walk users through a certain process, maybe they're filling out a questionnaire or something along those lines, the less pop-ups you utilize, the better it is on your user. Try to limit your usage of pop-ups as much as you can, and only use them when absolutely necessary. Now, one of the biggest pet peeves of mine, and I think many of us probably hate this more than we hate pop-ups, autoplay videos and autoplay background music. Now let me ask you guys this before I talk about it more. How much do y'all hate it when they have autoplay videos and music that just catches you off guard?
Super annoying.
That is one of my top 10 pet peeves about websites, right behind pop-ups and paywalls.
I find autoplay videos much more annoying and 1,000 times worse than intrusive pop-ups. Here's the thing about that. A lot of websites utilize them without keeping their users in mind. To me, they're flat out disrespecting their users. When you have autoplay music and videos, you're scaring them. They're not expecting to hear someone just start talking when they pull up a page on your website. In some cases, it'll scare them, especially when it comes to music. Music can make people very jumpy. There are people out there who are very sensitive to loud noises. Using autoplay content will scare such people. Do not, I cannot stress this enough, do not use autoplay content. Whenever I hear videos and music start autoplaying, I don't waste any time. I just hit the back button. Even if I know that that website has what I need, I go back, I leave, and I look for another website that'll help me find what I need. I advise all my clients when I'm designing their websites that we will always go by what we think is best, and we certainly do not recommend autoplay content. That is the worst.
Yeah, it's very frustrating indeed.
One thing that I find is really annoying is advertising, especially mobile, that's able to bypass silent mode on your phone. Some ads are known to do that. Advertisements that are able to bypass your silent mode with their audio that don't have the ability to switch the audio off, I believe should be illegal. And here's why, is because you might be in a library, you might be in jail, might be in court, but need your phone on anyway, for whatever reason. And I think that when ads disrupt your experience like that, that it's not only a bad idea and not only likely to scare your customers, but that's in my opinion, scammer move to not have the ability to switch off the audio. And it makes me that much warier of products that those ads promote.
Yes, I agree. There needs to be some sort of regulation on that. Everything you said was spot on correct. There is just no reason for websites to force their audio onto you, even when you have silent mode turned on. There is just no need for that. That's just their way of being pushy and rude. And not only is it a scammer move, but it's also a shady salesperson type move. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. They're trying to force something onto you that you have no interest in. I agree. I agree with you 1,000,000%. Another thing that I also find ridiculously annoying, and you and me both agree with me on this, because it falls into almost the same category as pop-ups, live chats that pop up out of nowhere when you're simply trying to browse the website. You don't have any need to talk to anybody, but that chat just comes up out of nowhere, and you don't need help, you're just browsing or looking. Do y'all agree with me on that? How annoying is that?
Yeah, it's super annoying. That happens in every single site you go on now. It flags up.
That's one of the most annoying features of modern websites on desktop, laptop platforms. And more often than not, I've found that the live chat feature on most mobile websites either doesn't work correctly or directs you to Facebook Messenger or iMessage, depending on what platform you're on. And that can be a real pain in the backside to fix because quite often, if you're going to get directed to that chat, you're usually wanting to talk to tech support to try to diagnose a problem with a product that you're having. But if you're doing that, you're usually going to try to call tech support first instead of an online automated portal.
Yes, that's correct. And in fact, many people who are going online, they're looking for the tech support number. They're pulling up their website for whichever company they need help with. They're looking for a method to contact tech support, but they're not particularly interested in using the live chat feature because they're going to assume they're not going to get connected to a live person. Now, we did a whole episode a few months ago talking about how too much AI is a bad thing, and we're just revisiting that topic again because that can also destroy the user experience, especially when the live chatbot fails to connect you with an agent but instead keeps trying to push self-help articles in your face that you don't even need or aren't even relevant to your problem at hand. Having that live chat in general pop up while you're in the middle of scrolling is very annoying, and I also don't like how they pretend that a live person is talking. That's very annoying. It'll say, hello, this is, and then it'll have a real human name there, trying to make you think that there's an actual person talking to you, when it in fact is just a robot programmed to show human names. And then it'll just walk you through a series of prompts, and then after going through the prompts, it'll connect you to a live agent. It's really deceptive, and when you're just browsing the website, maybe you just simply don't need assistance at the moment, you're just simply browsing and looking around. I don't like it when those live chats just pop up out of nowhere, because the same principle about pop-ups that we described earlier applies to the live chat as well, because the live chat is a form of a pop-up. It does not need to be so in your face. It should just be relegated to a little button in the corner that you tap on it or click on it when you need it. It should just not pop out and ask you if you need help automatically while you're busy trying to browse the website. That's how you hinder the mobile experience. And yes, also going back to what you said, Justin, about how it's connected to Facebook Messenger or iMessage, that can also be problematic because not everybody uses those apps or those services. So how can you expect to generate leads with your chatbot if you're utilizing a service that they probably aren't using? Make sure you have just a general chatbot set up that does not require some sort of service that requires you to sign into. And also, just simply make sure your chatbot isn't disturbing your users who are trying to browse your website. It should not destroy the UX simply because you're trying to push it out there. You're trying to make it very intrusive. I just don't like chatbots in general who do this. It's the same exact thing as a pop-up. The same principle of annoying pop-ups applies to chatbots, and make them less intrusive, website owners.
For me, if I want to speak to a robot, I'll click it myself. I don't need someone to try and push it in my face.
Exactly. Chatbots are just too intrusive. They try to push them right into your face. I don't need help all the time. It's no different than when you go to the store, especially a store that sells products on commission with commission salespeople. When they come up to you while you're trying to peacefully browse, asking you if you need help. Sometimes that is a problem at certain stores where there's nobody around when you need help, but conversely, it's also problematic when your employees ask you too much if you need help when you're simply trying to browse. It's very rude.
Yeah, it's just the same, but it's virtual, isn't it?
It's the virtual method of that. It's the same exact thing. Both methods involve trying to convert visitors to customers, and if you're just being very intrusive and rude about it, that visitor is not going to become a customer. It's important to be friendly, but you also don't want to be that friendly type of rude either. And we've also discussed that in a previous episode, as it's a completely different topic. Going back to website pet peeves, how many of you hate it, absolutely hate it, when you pull up a website and they have nothing but paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of text, and you're not reading a blog post? I'm talking about on the regular static pages, especially on the homepage. How many of y'all hate that?
Yeah, I don't need to know the ins and out of every single article on the site. That is annoying.
That's one of my top 5 pet peeves for website design. Unless I'm looking through tech articles trying to figure something out, or a news article trying to do research on something, keep the text relegated to the FAQ section, please.
Yes, I agree. And company history, save it for the about page too. Don't put all this text that requires endless paragraphs on your homepage. One thing that I always tell my clients is that when it comes to creating a website, your text and your graphics should aid in delivering the message at hand. It should not distract by having an imbalance between the two. Text, photos, and graphics should all have a good balance. There should never be one dominating the other, and that's especially true with text. People do not want to read endless paragraphs unless they're reading an article or a blog post. Your website is not a newspaper, it's not a magazine, and it's not a legal document. And the reason why I say that is because I can't stand websites that utilize Times New Roman as their font of choice, because it's a serif font. A serif meaning that it's got the little points on the end of it. That's another thing. Make sure that your fonts that you use on your website are easy on the eye. Don't use serif fonts. Use sans serif fonts that look nice and clean. And don't use generic ones either, like Arial. Use something that has character to it, that really helps your brand stand out. That's another thing on its own right there. I can't stand it when websites utilize Times New Roman as their font of choice, or a serif font. Those are great for newspapers and legal documents, but on screen, no. Don't even go near them.
I don't like the graphics. You know, sometimes you have the pictures or the graphics or the on the websites that are showing certain things, but they're moving. I don't like movable graphics on there because it can give you a headache, too much of that.
Yes, I agree. And on top of that, there are people who have disabilities and are subject to seizures. Having too much going on can really, really destroy the user experience for users who have disabilities. It's important to ensure that if you're going to use motion graphics, there's not too much motion going on. It's okay to have maybe a headline slide in or fade in, something like that, but you don't want to have a million different elements moving around on the page. That can be a turnoff, and I personally do not like that myself. I'm a very straightforward, straight to the point person. I don't like having to go through endless animations and endless pages to find what I need. I just want to be able to get the message delivered without any additional fluff. Having too much going on in terms of animation is a major turnoff, because people start to think, what is this? Am I on a website? Or am I watching a cartoon? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've suffered with migraines, so it doesn't do me any favors being on a site like that.
This is what I would do. I don't like to design websites with a ton of animations on them. I just make sure that the most important information is shown on the home page and the most important message is presented at the top, so that people do not have to scroll through it to find it. Having a bunch of animations that lead into the message will not work out well, especially not only if you are susceptible to having seizures and getting headaches, but also if you're impatient and don't want to wait around. If you're like me and want to get straight to the point, having animations is not going to help. A few days ago, I was shopping my competition in the Houston area to see what they were doing, and a lot of their own websites for their own design firms were not very good. A lot of them were very plain looking. A lot of them were overdoing it with animations, just like you were telling me about, Sarah. A lot of them were using animations, and I personally feel that it looks rather juvenile. Secondly, too many of them had too much text on their homepage with no balance of graphics and pictures. And too many of them had pop-ups. All these Houston area design agencies were breaking so many rules of web design, and they're supposed to be experts in the field. All I can say is shame on all of them. I'm not going to name any names, but I saw your websites. They need work. So, Justin, I wanted to also ask you, what were some of the other items on your list of pet peeves that we have not talked about yet?
Lack of support for encrypted communication between you and your customer, especially if you're a website that sells things.
Yes, that's also very important too. When it comes to encryption, here's the thing. Every website is required to have an SSL certificate, which, as we've discussed in other episodes, ensures that information being processed through your website is encrypted. Justin, before I even go over the answer to this question of how can you tell if a website is encrypted, what do you look for when you're browsing the web? What do you look for to ensure that a website has encryption and you know that your data is being transmitted securely?
I typically look for the S at the HTTPS section to make sure that it's not being transmitted over a non-secured connection. There are some websites and even a couple of banks I will not use because they refuse to allow access through a non-encrypted connection.
Now, let me talk about that. It's very important to have SSL on your website because not only does Google look for this as a ranking factor, they started doing this back in 2018, not very long ago, but you're also opening a lot of doors to legal trouble if you're transmitting extremely sensitive data over an unsecure connection. You will be personally responsible should your systems get hacked and their data gets leaked and stolen by hackers. So an SSL certificate ensures that all data being transmitted through your website remains secure. Now, for banks, it's especially important that they have SSL turned on. If you're banking with a bank that is not forcing some sort of encryption, whether it be through the browser or other methods, do not even utilize their online banking. In fact, I wouldn't even bank with them at all because if they're neglecting cybersecurity, who knows what else they're also neglecting on in terms of security in general for your account, right?
Exactly. And that's why there are certain prepaid banks that you can go with if you've got limited credit that are typically known as prepaid banking cards that I would not recommend to anybody because of certain illegal tactics that their customer support teams have used against me.
Right, and you have to be very careful with stuff like that. You don't want their illegal tactics to end up being your downfall somewhere. It's very important to make sure that all your personal information is transmitted securely, not just with banking or online shopping, but in general. When you are browsing the net, look at the address bar of the website that you're visiting. Look to see if it has the S and also the padlock next to it. There should also be a padlock next to the URL in the address bar. On some browsers it shows up as green. Some browsers it'll show up as red if it's not secure and doesn't have SSL. That's what you want to look for. If it says not secure or lacks the S in the HTTP, that is when you leave that website and don't fill out any forms on it. Website owners, don't even launch your website if you don't have SSL. Make sure that your hosting company is providing SSL in some form. There are different levels of SSL, but at the bare minimum, you'll want to have at least the basic one. Think of it as car insurance. The basic SSL certificate is akin to having liability insurance, the most basic level to make you legal. So think of it in that aspect if you're not sure how to move forward with that. SSL began as a major Google ranking factor back in 2018, and it's not going away anytime soon. At the time, Google also updated Chrome to block websites that are not secure. So if you try to pull up a website that is not secure and doesn't have SSL, it'll give you a warning up front telling you not to proceed. Don't kill your chances of success simply because you neglected cybersecurity on your website's end. That is a major pet peeve of mine, to see that to this day websites are still unsecure. There's not that many that are, but for the ones that still are, you need to make changes right now. And while we're on the topic of staying current, how many of you have ever visited a website, whether it be on your desktop computer or on your phone, that says that Flash Player, Adobe Flash Player is required?
I don't like using websites that have that because And correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't that player been discontinued?
Yes, it has been. It's been discontinued since 2020. There is no reason in the world websites should still be using Adobe Flash in 2023. It's been discontinued. Long before it was discontinued, it was never compatible with mobile devices. You could not load Flash on iOS or Android. There has just been no reason at all to use Flash since the beginning of mobile browsing. Flash lacks a lot of benefits too. It has no security. You can't optimize Flash content for SEO. And in general, it's a major security risk to even continue using it because Adobe is not updating it anymore. You can't download it. There's just no reason for it. Website owners out there who are still using Adobe Flash to this day, you need to stop right now and get a modern website built. You're only hurting yourself if you're going to continue to use this antiquated method of designing a website. While we're still on the topic of mobile responsiveness, let me ask you guys this now. How many of you have visited a website lately that is not mobile responsive? The desktop version of the website loads up on your phone where you see the full navigation, everything's tiny, and it's just not adapting to your screen size. Have y'all seen that happen before?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
All
that's
the time.
really annoying.
Yeah, all the time.
That is also another kiss of death when it comes to trying to promote your business with a website that is not responsive. Google will penalize your website if it's not responsive, as I mentioned earlier. That has been a ranking factor for a very long time now. The majority of the world browses the net on their phones or on tablets. You can expect to see more people browsing the net on a mobile device than they are on a desktop or laptop computer. But there is no reason to have a website that's not responsive. You're hurting yourself majorly if the desktop version of your website is loading on your mobile phone. So if you're trying to generate leads with your website and it's not responding, guess what? You've lost a lot of leads. As soon as they see that your website has not loaded properly on their phone, they're going to hit that back button and they're going to go somewhere else. You just lost a customer. Do not keep your website going if it is not responsive to mobile devices. Get it redesigned. I can't stress that enough. That is awful. I don't understand why some people neglect their websites. It's one of their most important marketing tools. And without it, you can't expect to get found on the internet, obviously. We've covered a lot of different pet peeves that many of us just can't stand. The world in general can't stand them. Aside from what we've discussed so far, does anybody else have any other examples they'd like to share?
I don't offhand. No, I think we've covered a hell of a lot of the peeves that I have too. So
We've covered pretty much
not sure about
everything that
Justin.
makes me mad about website design.
Let's end the show talking about one very, very important one, and that is websites that load very, very slow. Website loading time is also a ranking factor on Google. Google will penalize websites that do not load in a timely manner. You've got 3 seconds tops to capture your audience. I always talk about the importance of first impressions, and they also account with websites especially. Websites are an extension of your storefront. If your website is not loading in a timely manner, your bounce rate is going to go up and your user's going to pick a competitor instead. Google is also going to penalize your website and push it further down the list if it doesn't load fast enough, and they'll eventually just blacklist you. It's a very important ranking factor for Google, and it's also very important in terms of UX. Believe it or not, a 1 second delay, according to Amazon and their study that they just recently performed, could cost them $1.6 billion in sales. Load speed's important. So can you imagine that if Amazon could lose $1.6 billion in sales, how much your own small business could lose by a 1 second delay? You've really got to bring your A game when it comes to website speed. There's a lot of different factors that take into account. Large pictures can slow down your website, as well as content that is not embedded externally, such as videos. If you're going to use video, make sure you're embedding from YouTube and not hosting them on your own website. That will also slow down your website. Additionally, if you're on WordPress, having too many plugins will slow down your website. So you're going to want to uninstall the ones that you are not using, and also go through your media library, delete excess content that you are hosting within your website that you're not utilizing, such as pictures. You might have a lot of pictures in your media library that you're not using. Deleting the ones that you don't need will help you speed up your website. These are just little things that could help increase website speed. And also utilize a content delivery network, or CDN. This will help you serve your content from several different servers worldwide in the background and you don't have to do anything. Depending on where your visitors are visiting from, the CDN will serve the content from the server that is closest to them, thus increasing website speed. Cloudflare offers a free plan if you're looking for a CDN for your own website, just letting you know. But slow websites are a deal killer. If you really want to lose your customers, just neglect your website speed. I want to hear how y'all feel about website speed. How do you feel about websites that load slower than molasses?
Terrible. I don't like the frozen ones as well. You're halfway through a transaction and the whole website freezes. So you have no choice to restart it all over again, and then you can't get to where you were first of all. That is a blooming annoying as well.
Another thing I don't like is websites that cause your whole system to crash.
Oh yes, I know exactly what you mean. Those are usually websites that have too much going on and you have no choice but to push Control, Alternate, and Delete, or Command, Shift, Escape if you're on Mac, to force quit your browser. Yeah, those are terrible. The only reason why you would see something like that happen is because it was poorly developed and different platforms were not taken into account. You have to test your website after you get it built on different platforms. You have to make sure that those things are not happening, that it's not crashing every time someone pulls it up, or certain items look out of place, or you're seeing something on one browser that's not showing up on the other. You see irregularities. It's important to test your website on multiple browsers, both mobile and on desktop, which means having to test on different operating systems. Test it out on all the major mainstream browsers. On Windows and Mac, you will see Chrome, Firefox, and Edge available for both platforms. On Mac specifically, you got the Safari browser, which is also available in mobile version on iOS. On Android, several of these same browsers I'm talking about are also available there. But then Android also has its own native browser that you'll want to test it on. Test your website and see how it loads and looks on different platforms, because you have a lot of visitors out there. They're not all going to be using the same thing. So you have to take them all into account. Make sure that your website is being served properly for every single possible user you might have. It's important to do usability testing. And also, right after you get your website built, hold your own focus group. Have different people test it out and see how it loads for them. Different friends, different family members. If you're willing to spend money on a public focus group, you can do that too. Have them look at it. They'll tell you what they like, what they don't like. It's a great way to find out how your website is. But don't neglect on these little things. Well, they're not little things. Don't neglect on these things in general. Take your website's functionality seriously. Don't neglect it. Work with your website design firm to make sure that everything is up and running regularly. We do that all the time at CDG. We always like to make sure that all our websites work properly. We check everything before we launch them. And if we see any issues later, we address them right away. That is, if we see any issues that come up later after launch, we address them right away. We don't neglect them. It's important to check these things. Otherwise, you're just going to lose money. It's already time for us to go ahead and close out. Does anybody else have any final remarks or want to discuss something that we did not cover throughout the show?
No, I think I'm quite happy with the results there, Christian.
I am as well. My one final remark to the business owners out there is that with regard to Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and Linux are the 5 largest platforms that you can do business on. And in this increasingly mobile world, you're going to need to have platform agnostic if you want to maximize your customer base.
That is true.
Meaning you'll need to support all of them equally on the browser engines they use if you want to be found and maximize your online sales.
You especially want to have a very serious focus on responsiveness as well, because the 3 major devices that people browse the internet on are phones, tablets, and desktop and laptop computers. You need to test your website on browsers on all 4 of these devices on all these operating systems. If you do not have a device that has a certain operating system, you could always borrow from a friend, or you can go to stores that have them on displays and just on their display computers see how they work. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. I'm going to end the show with this final remark, and that is bring your A game when it comes to user experience on your website. Don't neglect on any area. Inspect every little aspect of it that you can to make sure that your website is being served properly without issues. And here at CDG, we will inspect your existing website and do a full audit on it for no charge. We'll do a free audit to make sure that everything is working. Yes, thank you for that, Justin. And Sarah, thank you for your contributions as well. Thank you for all of everything that you shared. All the content that you shared with us today was great. And I hope that all of the business owners out there will have several important key points to take away with them and keep in mind as they get ready to check their websites. Thank you both for joining me on the show. This was a great episode.
Thank you, Christian. Take care.
Thank you, Christian. Always a pleasure.